You know, in every market there's opportunities. And I was sitting and listening to George the other day talk to some of our agents about an opportunity he had several years ago with a Del Taco out in the Inland Empire. And how many times did you end up selling that one property?
3 times.
3 times. But I think, you know, creating your opportunity, this is one way to really do it. So I wanted to have George come in and walk us through what he saw on that property and how this all came about to really sell it, renegotiate the lease. Because I think those of you that are agents or your investors are out there, there are opportunities. You just have to know what to look for when you're out there. For STNL, this is. So, so George, you had a Del Taco Inland Empire. You had a buyer that was looking for a long-term hold originally?
Well, originally I had a buyer that was looking for a medium long-term hold. They wanted to purchase a property. They were looking for an investment, wanted more cash flow.
Right.
So we identified this particular property, and I really like the fundamentals about this because, you know, what I try and do every single time when it comes to every property that we look at for our clients or for ourselves is that what's the exit strategy?
Yep.
And this one I really liked about the exit strategy, and it's not just the short-term exit strategy or long-term exit strategy, but all-encompassing. Meaning, what happens if, for some reason, something happens next year? Mm-hmm. You know, you weren't planning on selling the property for 5-6 years, but what's your exit then? You know, because we can't necessarily foresee everything that's going to happen. But what we can do is base ourselves on the real estate fundamentals of the property to create value.
Okay, so the original client, long-term hold, what happened? Why did he change his mind?
You know, he wanted, well, he originally looked at this as an investment structure, but then decided that he wanted to take out those funds, and then part of the long-term hold is we had an actual strategy of repositioning the asset. You know, there was 8 years remaining on the lease, but they had no options. So realistically speaking, for the most part, most tenants are not necessarily going to be open to renegotiating the lease that far out.
Yeah.
And so we had a plan of action that we would actually acquire the property. We would hold it for approximately 4 or 5 years, and then at that point start to renegotiate the lease into better terms, higher rates, and go forward. So we looked at all the underlying factors itself on the property to make sure that, you know, this is a property that the tenant's going to stay at.
Right.
You know, for instance, 1, corporate guaranteed Del Taco. 2, it was also the rent to sales ratios were very low. And the store was performing on average 150% higher than the average unit volume of Del Taco. So the store sales were about 150% of the system-wide average.
Okay.
So there's no reason at all for them to move.
Right, yeah.
You know, if anything, those are really strong factors that's going to allow you to negotiate even a better lease.
And yet he wanted out.
He wanted out. He wanted out because he had, and he only wanted out actually about a year after.
Right.
And he saw some other investments that he wanted to go after and didn't want that had potential for upside or potential, not necessarily having to hold on to the lease that long to maximize the return. So,
and he wanted to be near his home, didn't he?
And wanted to also a little more in Orange County area. But, you know, so we took a look at that. We ended up selling it to another client, actually, and for the same reasons, the client asked the same things. What can we do here? And originally, when he said he wanted to sell it, my response to him was, first, let me try and negotiate a longer term lease to maximize your return, and I think we can actually create appreciation.
Yep.
We were still able to sell. He decided he didn't want to wait. He just wanted to get it done. So we took it to market, ended up listing it, and we ended up selling it where he still walked away with a decent profit, you know, about $100,000.
Right.
Okay, for a 1 year hold, not too bad overall.
Okay.
The buyer, however, had the same concerns in that they wanted a long-term lease structure, and they were concerned about the 8. You know, the
well, you're
8
about
years
to 7
remaining.
years by now, right?
Just under that.
Okay.
So just over that, I should say. So yeah, but they were concerned about all of that. So one of the things that he asked us to do was to see if we could approach the tenant while in escrow to see if negotiating a longer-term lease. And I requested it from our client, the seller. He said absolutely, no problem. So we start talking to the tenant. And, ultimately, because we didn't have much leverage, because we're still 7 years out. I mean,
Right.
why is someone going to agree to pay for a higher rental rate if you're out 7 years?
Sure.
So what we ended up doing was making an offer that I thought was a win-win for everybody, because our client's motivation was they wanted a safer long-term lease on a corporate guaranteed with some options built into it.
Right.
The tenant wanted the same thing. So I actually called the tenant up, and their first response to me was, why are you calling us now? We got a little bit over 7 years remaining on the lease.
Yep.
And my response was pretty simple. It said, I'm going to make a offer to you that is going to keep it very simple. In fact, we're not even going to do a new lease. What we're going to do is just an amendment to the lease. So we can keep an older lease form here, but we're going to tighten up certain clauses in it with the amendment. In addition to that, the old lease form was a percentage rent based lease.
Okay.
So the tenant was reporting sales, and so we knew exactly what the sales were. And I told the tenant that we'd keep the same lease structure. The only difference is I wanted to increase the minimum base rent to what they paid in total last year with the percentage rent.
Okay.
So keep the same percentage rent clauses, give them a new 15-year lease, 2 new 5-year options.
And you remodeled the place too, right?
That was actually something else that we threw in there as well.
Yeah.
We said that if we're going to do this for you and keep the rental rate essentially the same, what we would like in exchange as a concession from the tenant
Yep.
for extending the lease term is we would want a remodel of the location, and they agreed to do it at their own dime. So generally speaking, a full remodel of the location increases sales by about 120%, or rather 20% increase,
Yeah.
120% above what was previously. So that's a win-win for everybody, because the corporate gets higher sales.
Sure.
The landlord, who's on a percentage rent clause,
Great looking property.
gets higher rent as
Yeah.
well, and they
Yeah.
get a newer property.
Yeah.
So client was absolutely ecstatic, because we worked it out under those terms, and and the funny part was they actually said, when they said the tenant came back to me and said, well, why would we do this? And I explained to them that because you want to be here in 8 years when the lease expires in 7.5, and I know what your store is doing. So I gave them all the same reasons why we advised the client to buy it. They agreed. We actually ended up doing a brand new 15-year lease.
Was it
not
a
new
franchise
amendment.
was-
Corporate.
It was a corporate. Okay.
Corporate went directly to corporate. It was a corporate guaranteed location. Client was ecstatic, very happy with it, and they were really happy just staying with it the way it was. I just happened about 9 months later, we happened to have a off-market unsolicited offer for $1 million more this time,
Yeah.
because we had a brand new lease.
Yeah. And a new
So,
property.
which is what created
Everything
the value.
looks- yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, newer looking, remodeled property. And so with that in mind, we ended up selling it. The actual numbers that we did, I think we
What was the first initial price?
$1,425,000.
And then you turned around and flipped it.
Turned
to,
around and sold
or
it
sold
at
it to the next-
$1,650,000.
And then you sold it for.
Sold it for $2,750,000 the next go around.
Let's see.
And then exchanged that into a higher cap rate property that was corporate guaranteed on the East Coast for my client.
Now, how you don't normally see deals. The reason I won't have you on is I thought this was a great story, but I think you've always got to be looking for opportunity, right? Or creating it. And this is a way that you really created that opportunity by having the wherewithal to feel free to go ahead and contact the client or the tenant, the corporation, and say, "Hey, let's redo this now, and here's why."
Yeah, these are definitely harder to find type properties.
Sure.
You can't do this to every single property. You have to. That's why 90+% of the properties we look at we don't like, because they don't have those exit strategies that you can work with and try and mitigate the risk. So, and that's 95% of the properties at least. This one just worked out very well, and it did come together, and I was actually, to be frank with you, a little surprised at how smooth everything was. Typically, there's still a little bit of pushback
Well,
or
the speed.
kickback.
The speed too. Was,
Speed and yes,
Yeah.
we were actually able to negotiate
timing,
a whole new lease renewal and terminology within 30 days.
Yeah, but it's finding the right client to do this with. You see these opportunities. Actually, we know other brokers that are doing a good number of these every year, but you have to be out there looking for them constantly.
Yeah.
So, well, George, thank you for coming and tell us your story. I just thought it was
Absolutely.
something that, as you know, we keep seeing all this negative news about our economy right now, but I really think that there are opportunities out there, and you just have to know what to look for.
Absolutely. Opportunities, I think there are always opportunities, whether it's a down market or up market, as long
Yeah.
as you stick to the fundamentals and have someone that can vet out what you're looking for.
Exactly. All right, well, George, thank you very much. I'm going to put George's contact information down below, and thank you for watching. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.